Returning from visiting my sister in Florida, the taxi pulled up to my son's suburban home where I'd lived for 3 years. My heart stopped. There on the sidewalk sat my carefully packed suitcases and personal boxes. Pinned to the largest bag was a handwritten note. "If you want to stay here, we have the garage." Signed by my loving daughter-in-law, Heather. Trembling with shock, I called the bank before the taxi even left. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I was the one covering the $2,800 monthly mortgage. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, unable to process what was happening. For 35 years, I had built a successful career as a hospital administrator, managing hundreds of staff members and multi-million-dollar budgets. I prided myself on being logical, practical, and level-headed. But in that moment, all my composure vanished. 5 years ago, my husband Frank died suddenly of a heart attack while we were celebrating our 40th anniversary. The pain of losing my college sweetheart, the father of our only son James, had been almost unbearable. Frank had handled all our finances, leaving me to navigate a world of insurance claims, property taxes, and investment decisions I knew little about. James had been my rock during that terrible time. He visited daily, helped sort through Frank's belongings, and sat with me through countless tearful nights. While he'd struggled financially since graduating college with a teaching degree, his emotional support had been unwavering. 4 years ago, James introduced me to Heather. She was pretty, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in my stories about Frank and our family history. When they announced their engagement after just 6 months of dating, I was surprised but supportive. At their small backyard wedding, Heather hugged me tightly and whispered, "I always wanted a mother like you." A year into their marriage, James and Heather found their dream house a beautiful 2-story colonial with a spacious yard in a good school district. But with James's teaching salary and Heather's part-time work as a dental receptionist, the mortgage was well beyond their means. "Mom, we hate to ask, but we're wondering if you might consider selling your house and maybe living with us?" James had asked hesitantly. "The new place has 4 bedrooms. You'd have your own space, and we could help each other out." It had seemed like the perfect solution. My 3-bedroom house had become too big and lonely. I sold it for a good price in a seller's market, using most of the money to help with their down payment. We signed papers at the bank establishing that I would cover the monthly mortgage payments of $2,800, though the house would be in their names. The arrangement made sense to me at the time. James was my only child, and eventually the house would be his inheritance anyway. The first 2 years had been wonderful. I had my own bedroom with an attached bathroom, and I loved being around my grandchildren, Lily and Ben. Heather often asked for my recipes and seemed to value my advice on gardening and home maintenance. We worked together on holiday meals and birthday celebrations. I felt I had a daughter at last. But over the past year, something had changed. Heather's warm smiles became tight-lipped and infrequent. She started forgetting to set a place for me at dinner or to tell me about family outings until they were already leaving. When I'd enter a room, hushed conversations between her and James would abruptly stop. 2 weeks ago, I decided to visit my sister Nancy in Florida to clear my head and discuss the growing tension. Nancy had always been perceptive about people. "Something doesn't feel right, Kath," she'd said after hearing my stories. "Have you checked your financial arrangements lately? Are you sure everything is as you agreed?" I'd dismissed her concerns as overly suspicious, but I did decide to return home a day earlier than planned to try to have an honest conversation with James and Heather. Now, staring at my luggage on the sidewalk, Nancy's warnings echoed in my mind. "Mrs. Parker? Cathleen?" I turned to see Carol Winters, our neighbor from across the street, walking toward me with a concerned expression. "Are you okay? What's happening with your things out here?" I could barely form words. I'm not sure. I just got back from visiting my sister." Carol glanced at the house, then back at me, her voice dropping. "I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've been worried about you. Heather told several neighbors that you've been showing signs of dementia and having some dangerous episodes. She said James might need to find a care facility for you. The blood drained from my face as Carol's words sank in. Dementia? Dangerous episodes? I had never experienced anything of the sort, but the pieces suddenly began clicking into terrible place. This wasn't just about wanting my bedroom or getting annoyed with having me around. This was something far more calculated. And I had a sickening feeling it had everything to do with money and the house I was paying for. The garage was cold, with concrete floors and exposed insulation in the unfinished walls. My son had hastily cleared a space among the lawn equipment, holiday decorations, and dusty exercise machines they never used. An old plaid sofa from their previous apartment had been pushed against one wall with mismatched sheets and a thin blanket thrown across it. No bathroom, no heating, just a small space heater James had plugged in that did little against the early spring chill. "It's just temporary until things settle down, Mom," James said, avoiding my eyes as he carried in the last of my suitcases. His shoulders hunched with what might have been shame or simply discomfort. At 43, my once confident son looked defeated, smaller somehow. "What exactly needs to settle down, James? I've been gone for 2 weeks. What happened while I was away?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "Heather thinks it would be better for everyone if you had your own space. She says you've been difficult lately." He glanced toward the house. "She's just trying to create some boundaries." "Boundaries?" "James, I've been living in this house for 3 years. I'm paying the mortgage. We had an agreement." His face flushed. "I know, Mom, but Heather feels. She says you criticize everything she does, that you undermine her with the kids. And last month, when you left the stove on—" "I didn't leave the stove on, James. I've never in my life been that careless. Heather found the burner on high when we got back from the movies. She says you got defensive when she mentioned it, that you didn't remember cooking at all that day." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the garage temperature. I remembered that day clearly. I hadn't cooked anything because I'd had lunch with Martha, my friend of 30 years. Heather had been the last one in the kitchen before they left for the movies, making snacks for the kids to sneak into the theater. I unpacked my things as best I could, arranging toiletries on a metal storage shelf and hanging clothes from a bike rack. My fingers trembled as I opened boxes, discovering items missing: photographs, jewelry, my address book. When I mentioned this to James, he looked pained. "Mom, you probably packed them somewhere else. Heather says you've been misplacing things a lot lately." That night, I was summoned to dinner in the main house like a visitor. Heather had prepared lasagna, my recipe, but with changes that made it nearly inedible: too much oregano, not enough salt. She served me last, a smaller portion than everyone else. "So good to have you back, Kathleen," she said brightly, as though nothing unusual was happening. "How is your sister? Still living in that little condo? Must be nice to have such a simple life with so few responsibilities." James poked at his food while Lily and Ben, 8 and 6, watched me with uncertain eyes. "The garage is actually an upgrade," Heather continued, cutting her lasagna into precise squares. "You'll have privacy out there. No one bothering you when you want to rest, which I know you need more of these days." Her smile never reached her eyes. "James and I thought about suggesting an assisted living facility, but this way you can still be close to the grandkids." I looked at my son, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. This was the boy I'd nursed through chickenpox, the teenager I'd taught to drive, the young man whose college tuition I'd scraped together after Frank's business hit hard times. Now he sat silently while his wife insulted me and banished me to the garage. That night, I couldn't sleep on the lumpy sofa. The unfamiliar sounds of the garage water heater clicking and cars passing on the street kept me on edge. Around midnight, I got up to use the bathroom in the house, using the spare key James had reluctantly provided for emergencies. As I passed their bedroom, I heard Heather's voice, low but distinct. "We need to talk about your mom's money situation. I think we should get power of attorney before things get worse." "She doesn't have dementia, Heather." James sounded exhausted. "You're not a doctor, honey. You don't see what I see when you're at work. The confusion, the mood swings. It's getting worse, and we need to protect her money." "I mean, protect her." I slipped back to the garage, my mind racing. Back at my makeshift bed, I pulled out a small notebook and began documenting everything: dates, times, conversations, missing items. If Heather wanted a battle, she'd picked the wrong opponent. The next morning, I noticed my pill organizer had been rearranged. I'd been taking the same heart medication for years, small white tablets I recognized by sight. Now there were additional pale blue pills mixed in, slightly smaller than my regular medication. I pocketed one of the blue pills instead of taking it, and later, while Heather was grocery shopping, used James's computer to search for pill identifications. What I found made my blood run cold. The blue pill was a mild sedative, often prescribed for anxiety but with side effects including confusion, dizziness, and memory problems, exactly the symptoms Heather was telling everyone I had. I flushed the remaining blue pills down the toilet, careful to leave my regular medication. That night, I pretended to take the pills Heather watched me swallow with a glass of water, but palmed the blue ones and disposed of them later. As I lay awake in the cold garage, a terrible realization formed in my mind. This wasn't just about getting me out of the house. This was about something much more sinister, and I would need help to fight it. "She's drugging you?" Martha's voice rose in outrage, causing several heads to turn in the small coffee shop 20 minutes from James and Heather's neighborhood. At 71, Martha Turner had been my friend since our children were in preschool together. After retiring as a legal secretary for one of the city's top law firms, she'd kept her sharp mind active with volunteer work and community college classes in computer science. "Keep your voice down," I said, glancing around nervously. "I can't be certain, but the pills match the description of lorazepam. They could make me seem confused, forgetful exactly what Heather's been telling everyone about me." Martha reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "We need to get you out of there immediately. You can stay with me." "I can't just leave. $300,000 of my money went into that house. I'm still paying the mortgage. If I walk away, I lose everything." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Then we fight. First, let's check all your financial records. Bring everything to my house tomorrow. Bank statements, investment accounts, credit reports, everything." The next day, while Heather was at work and James at school, I gathered as many financial documents as I could find. Many were missing from my filing box, but I had enough to start. At Martha's dining room table, we spread everything out. "Look at these withdrawals." Martha pointed to my checking account statements. $200 here, $500 there, all in the last 6 months. "Did you make these?" I shook my head, staring at transactions I'd never authorized. Martha picked up another paper. "And these credit card statements. When did you open an account with Premier Credit?" "I didn't." "Well, someone did in your name. They've charged nearly $4,000 in the past 3 months. My stomach nodded as we discovered more discrepancies: missing investment statements, changes to beneficiary designations, mysterious cash withdrawals. Using Martha's computer, we found the property records for the house, discovering its value had increased substantially due to a new shopping complex being built nearby. "You need legal help," Martha said firmly. "I'm calling Barbara Williams. She specialized in elder law before retiring, and she still consults occasionally. She'll know what to do." While waiting to meet with Barbara, I visited my bank alone, asking to speak with the manager. Kevin Peterson had handled my accounts for years. His face grew serious as I explained my concerns. "Mrs. Parker, I'm glad you came in. There have been several attempts to add your son as a joint account holder on your accounts. We declined the requests because the signatures didn't match our records, but whoever was trying was persistent." "When was this?" "The first attempt was about 4 months ago. The most recent was last week, while you were out of town." My hands trembled as I requested new account numbers, passwords, and a freeze on my credit reports. Back at Martha's house, we began researching Heather's background. Martha's friend Susan still worked at the courthouse and quietly looked up records for us. "Your daughter-in-law wasn't always Heather Collins," Martha reported after getting Susan's call. 10 years ago, she was Sarah Wilson. She changed her name after her first divorce. She told everyone she'd never been married before James, I said, puzzled. There's more. Susan found a civil case involving Sarah Wilson, her first husband's mother, sued her for financial exploitation. The case was settled out of court, but Susan says there were allegations that Sarah isolated the older woman from family, convinced everyone she was mentally incompetent, and drained her savings before divorcing the son. The room seemed to spin around me. It's the same pattern. Exactly the same, Martha confirmed grimly. This woman is a predator, Kath. And you're her target. Later that week, I met with Barbara Williams in her home office. At 76, the retired attorney remained sharp and focused, taking detailed notes as I explained my situation. This is textbook elder abuse, Mrs. Parker. Financial exploitation, psychological manipulation, isolation from support systems. She adjusted her reading glasses. The good news is we can stop it. The bad news is it won't be easy, especially with your son involved. James isn't behind this, I insisted. He's being manipulated too. Barbara nodded. That complicates things emotionally, but not legally. Here's what we need to do. We developed a strategy. First, document everything, keeping records of all financial transactions, conversations, incidents with dates and times. Second, secure my remaining assets, setting up new accounts at a different bank and changing all passwords. Third, find alternative housing. Martha insisted I could stay with her as long as needed, but I'd need my own place eventually. Most importantly, I needed to play along temporarily, making Heather believe her plan was working, while I gathered evidence and protected myself. Act a little confused sometimes, Barbara suggested. Let her think the drugs are working. The more she believes she's succeeding, the more careless she'll become. I returned to the garage that evening, beginning what I privately called Operation Underestimation. I occasionally misplaced items deliberately, asked Heather to repeat herself, and pretended not to remember recent conversations, all while documenting everything, disposing of the mystery pills, and gradually moving my most important possessions to Martha's house. Through careful observation, I discovered Heather had been intercepting my mail, including bank statements and communications from friends. I set up a new email account and got a prepaid phone she didn't know about. One afternoon, I overheard something that chilled me to the bone. Heather was in the kitchen with Lily and Ben, thinking I was napping in the garage. Remember, don't be alone with Grandma anymore, she was saying in a gentle but firm voice. She might hurt you without meaning to, but Grandma never hurts us, Lily protested. She's sick in her head, sweetie. She doesn't know what she's doing sometimes. If Grandma asks you to go somewhere alone with her, you come find me or Daddy right away. Promise? Promise, both children answered, their voices small and confused. Later that day, when Ben saw me in the backyard, he stopped abruptly and ran back inside. My own grandson was afraid of me. That night, I cried silently on the garage sofa, feeling more alone than ever. But by morning, my sadness had hardened into resolve. Heather had crossed a line she would regret. It was time to fight back. Kathleen, are you sure you're feeling up to the farmer's market today? You seemed so tired yesterday. Heather's voice dripped with fake concern as she handed me a glass of water and my morning pills. I had been implementing Operation Underestimation for 3 weeks now, carefully building the impression of declining cognitive function while secretly preparing my counterattack. I took the pills from her with slightly shaky hands, a performance I'd been perfecting. I think the fresh air might do me good, I said, making my voice sound uncertain. I pretended to swallow the pills, but slipped the suspicious blue ones into the pocket of my cardigan. Well, if you're sure. Heather glanced at her watch. But don't wander off this time. Last week you gave me quite a scare when I couldn't find you by the tomato stand. I hadn't wandered off, of course. I'd deliberately stepped around a corner to speak privately with Carol Winters, who was becoming an important ally. More neighbors were beginning to question Heather's stories about my condition, as I made sure to have lucid, coherent conversations with them when she wasn't around. My secret apartment was ready, a modest 1-bedroom in a senior living community 10 minutes away. Martha had helped me furnish it with basics from discount stores, and I'd been moving small personal items there bit by bit. Barbara had prepared legal documents terminating the mortgage arrangement with proper notice. The most difficult part was documenting the financial exploitation without tipping off Heather or James. Barbara had helped me file identity theft reports for the fraudulent credit cards and freeze my credit at all 3 bureaus. We'd found evidence of nearly $30,000 in unauthorized transactions over the past 6 months. What I hadn't yet done was confront my son. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to believe James was knowingly participating in Heather's scheme. Blinded by love or fear or both, he had become her accomplice, but I held on to hope that he could still see the truth. That afternoon, while Heather was at her book club, I asked James to help me move some boxes in the garage. "I wanted to talk to you privately," I said once we were alone, "about some concerns I have." "Mom, if this is about the garage situation again, it's about Heather, James. I've discovered some disturbing information." I took a deep breath. "Did you know she changed her name? That she was previously Sarah Wilson?" His expression shifted from impatience to confusion. "What are you talking about?" I showed him the court records Martha had obtained. 10 years ago, she was married to another man. She moved in with his mother, isolated her from family, convinced everyone the older woman was mentally incompetent, and took her money. The pattern is identical to what's happening now. James's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly why Heather wanted some space from you. These paranoid accusations, these attempts to come between us. Mom, you need help. I'm not imagining this, James. Look at the documents. Anyone can fake paperwork." He threw the pages down. "Heather warned me you might do something like this. She said when her grandmother got dementia, she made up elaborate conspiracy theories too. I'm paying for this house, James. I put $300,000 down and I'm covering the mortgage every month. Why would I make up stories about the arrangement? Because you're sick. You're confused." He was shouting now, his face red. "You think I don't see it? The forgetfulness, the mood swings, the paranoia? Heather's been protecting you, covering for your episodes so the kids won't be frightened. Episodes that conveniently started after she began slipping sedatives into my medication?" James stepped back as if I'd slapped him. "That's enough, Mom. If you can't stop these accusations, maybe we do need to look into a facility where you can get proper care." I realized then that words alone wouldn't convince him. Heather's manipulation ran too deep. I would need to show him through actions. "I'm sorry, James," I said quietly. "You're right. I haven't been feeling like myself lately." The relief on his face was painful to see. He thought I was backing down, surrendering to their version of reality. Little did he know I was preparing for the final phase of my plan. The next day, I met with Barbara and Martha to finalize everything. "The notice to terminate mortgage payments has been prepared," Barbara said, sliding a document across the table. "Once you sign this, it will be delivered to the bank and to James and Heather. You're required to give 30 days notice." "And then what happens?" I asked. "Then the bank will expect them to make the payments. Given what we know about their finances, they probably can't afford it. Eventually, if payments aren't made, foreclosure proceedings will begin." "I don't want to make my grandchildren homeless," I said, hesitating. "Cathleen," Martha said gently, "think about what Heather is doing. She's trying to take everything from you, your money, your home, your relationship with your family, even your sense of reality. If you don't stop this now, you'll lose everything, and James and the children will learn that exploitation works." I signed the papers. That evening, I called Frank's brother Gerald and several of James's cousins who lived nearby. Over the past month, they'd been told I didn't want visitors or phone calls part of Heather's isolation strategy. Now I reached out, asking them to come to a family meeting at Martha's house the following Saturday. "Whatever Heather has told you about my mental state isn't true," I told Gerald. "I need family support right now, and I can prove I'm being taken advantage of." The next phase would be the hardest, confronting Heather and James directly. I planned to tell them I was moving out and would no longer pay their mortgage, but Heather forced my hand before I could implement this step. I was reading to Ben in the living room when Heather suddenly appeared in the doorway. "Ben, come here right now," she said sharply. The little boy looked confused, but did as he was told. "What were you doing?" Heather demanded, pulling him into the kitchen. "Grandma was just reading me a story," he said in a small voice. "Go to your room, now." After Ben left, Heather turned to me, her eyes cold. "I told you not to be alone with the children. I was reading him a book, Heather." In the living room, with the door open, she stepped closer. "I know what you're doing. The phone calls, the meetings with Martha. You think I don't notice? You think you can turn my family against me?" In that moment, I saw the mask slip completely. Gone was any pretense of concern, replaced by naked hostility. "This is my house," she hissed. "My family. You're just a confused old woman who can't accept that her time of control is over." "Actually, it's a house I'm paying for," I replied calmly. "And James is my son. The children are my grandchildren. You can't erase those relationships, no matter how hard you try." Something dark flashed in her eyes. "We'll see about that." She stormed out, and I knew I needed to accelerate my plans. I called Martha immediately. "I need to move everything up. I think Heather's going to make some kind of drastic move." I was right. The very next day, I returned from a doctor's appointment to find James waiting for me, his expression grim. "We need to talk," he said. He led me to the living room where Ben sat on the sofa, a small bruise visible on his arm. "Tell Grandma what happened," Heather prompted, her arm around the boy's shoulders. Ben looked at the floor. "Grandma hurt me." My breath caught. "What?" "Ben, I haven't seen you since yesterday. He says you got angry when he wouldn't take a nap," Heather said, her voice steady. "That you grabbed his arm too hard." "That's a lie. I've been at the doctor's office all morning. Dr. Walsh can confirm that." "Mom, Ben wouldn't make this up," James said. But I could see uncertainty in his eyes. "No, but Heather would." I turned to my daughter-in-law. "Did you hurt your son to frame me? Or just coach him to lie?" Ben began to cry. "I want to go to my room." "It's okay, sweetie," Heather soothed. "Grandma is having one of her confused episodes. This is why we talked about not being alone with her, remember?" James ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, I think you should pack your things. This isn't working anymore." "On that, we agree," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'll be gone by tomorrow." I walked out to the garage, pulled out my secret phone, and called Martha. "It's time." The senior apartment was small but bright, with large windows overlooking a courtyard garden. After 3 weeks of living in a garage, it felt like a luxury resort. Martha helped me unpack the last of my belongings, while Barbara organized a stack of legal documents on the dining table. "The notice to terminate mortgage payments has been delivered," Barbara confirmed. "I've also filed restraining orders based on the false accusation involving Ben. The identity theft reports are proceeding through the proper channels, and I've notified Adult Protective Services about the medication tampering." I sank into a comfortable armchair by the window, emotionally exhausted but resolute. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for their response," Barbara said. "Given Heather's pattern, she'll likely try to discredit you further, tell family members you're having a complete breakdown, possibly even try to pursue guardianship, which is why tomorrow's family meeting is so important," Martha added. "Getting ahead of her narrative is crucial." The gathering at Martha's house the next day was tense. Frank's brother Gerald was there, along with James's cousins Anne and Thomas and their spouses. James and Heather had been invited but predictably declined, calling it another example of Mom's paranoia. One by one, I presented the evidence records of financial exploitation, documentation of the medication tampering, court records from Heather's previous marriage, statements from neighbors about her campaign to convince everyone I had dementia. Martha and Barbara provided supporting testimony. "I've known Cathleen for 30 years," Martha told the assembled family. "There is absolutely nothing wrong with her mind. This is a calculated attempt to gain control of her assets." Gerald, who had always been close to Frank, looked devastated. "Why didn't you come to us sooner, Kath?" "Heather systematically isolated her," Barbara explained. "Classic elder abuse tactic. She intercepted mail, screened phone calls, told everyone Cathleen didn't want visitors, And James? Anne asked. Is he part of this? I hesitated. I believe James is being manipulated as much as I was. Heather has convinced him I'm mentally declining. He's choosing to believe her over the evidence because the alternative is too painful to accept. By the end of the meeting, my extended family understood the situation. They agreed to reach out to James separately, to try to help him see the truth without Heather's interference. Meanwhile, the first mortgage payment deadline passed without payment from James and Heather. The bank sent a notice of missed payment, the first step in what could eventually lead to foreclosure. 2 days later, James showed up at my apartment alone. How did you find me? I asked, surprised to see him. Gerald told me. He looked terrible, exhausted, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. Can I come in? I stepped aside to let him enter. He took in the small but comfortable space, his expression unreadable. Uncle Gerald came to see me yesterday. So did Anne and Thomas. They all told me the same story. He sat heavily on the sofa. I don't know what to believe anymore, Mom. I sat across from him. What has Heather told you about why I left? That you're having some kind of breakdown. That the stress of living with us became too much and you're lashing out, trying to hurt us by stopping the mortgage payments. He rubbed his face. She says you've turned the family against us out of spite. And what do you think, James? He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I don't know. Ben admitted he lied about you hurting him. Said Mommy told him to say it. His voice broke. But Heather says you must have pressured him to recant. That you're manipulating everyone. Including your cousins? Uncle Gerald? Martha, who's known you since you were 5 years old. The bank manager who confirmed someone tried to access my accounts without authorization? Are we all conspiring against Heather? James was silent for a long moment. The bank called today. They're starting foreclosure proceedings if we don't make the mortgage payment within 30 days. I know. I received the same notice. We can't afford the house without your help, Mom. I'm aware of that too. So you're punishing us? Making us homeless to prove a point? I leaned forward. No, James. I'm refusing to continue financing the comfortable lifestyle of a woman who drugged me, falsely accused me of harming my grandson, and attempted to steal my life savings. The fact that you still can't see what's happening breaks my heart. He stood abruptly. I should go. James, please. Look at the evidence. Talk to people who've known me your whole life. Ask yourself why Heather would lie about her past, about never being married before. He paused at the door. I'll look at whatever evidence you have. Not because I believe it, but because I owe you that much. After he left, I called Martha. James came by. I think there might be a crack in Heather's facade. That's progress, Martha said. But be careful. Cornered people can be dangerous. Her warning proved prescient. 2 days later, I received notice that Heather had filed for an emergency guardianship hearing, claiming I was mentally incompetent and a danger to myself and others. She'd found a doctor willing to submit an evaluation without ever having met me. Barbara was furious. This is a blatant abuse of the system. We'll fight it, of course, but the mere filing can cause problems for you, temporarily restrict your access to your accounts, create a legal cloud over your decision-making. She's desperate, I said. The mortgage notice must have pushed her to accelerate her plans. It's actually good news, Barbara replied. Desperate people make mistakes. One such mistake came to light the following week through an unexpected source. Martha's nephew worked at the local country club and mentioned seeing Heather there regularly with a man who wasn't James. She's a member? I asked, surprised. No, but he is. Patrick Winters. Divorced, works in real estate. They seem pretty cozy from what Tyler says. Barbara's investigator confirmed that Heather and this Patrick person had been meeting regularly for at least 6 months. Further digging revealed text messages discussing plans for after Heather's divorce plans that included my house and assets. She never intended to stay with James, I realized. This was always about the money and the house. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for the following month, giving us time to prepare. Barbara assembled an impressive array of evidence countering Heather's claims, medical evaluations confirming my cognitive health, witness statements from longtime friends and family, documentation of Heather's pattern of false statements. Meanwhile, James became increasingly distant from both me and Heather. According to Gerald, who had been spending time with him, my son was beginning to ask hard questions about his wife's behavior. The missed mortgage payment had forced them to borrow money from Heather's friend Patrick, creating new tension in their marriage. 3 days before the guardianship hearing, everything came to a head. James called me, his voice tight with emotion. "Can you come to the house? There's something I need to show you." "Is Heather there?" "No. She's at her book club. At least, that's what she said." His bitter tone spoke volumes. I was cautious. "I'll come, but I'm bringing Martha with me." An hour later, we sat in the living room where I had once felt so at home. James placed his laptop on the coffee table and played a video recording. "I installed security cameras last week," he explained. "After what Ben said about being told to lie, I needed to know what was happening when I wasn't home." The video showed Heather in the kitchen, talking on her phone. "It's taking longer than I thought," she was saying. "The old bat is fighting back. Got herself a lawyer." "No, James still doesn't suspect anything about us. Once I get control of her accounts, we'll have enough for the down payment on the lake house. Of course I'll divorce him, but we need to wait until the money's secure. The foreclosure is a complication, but if we can get the guardianship, we can force her to restart the mortgage payments." I watched my son's face as the recording played, seeing the last of his denial crumble. "There's more," he said quietly. "Texts, emails. She's been seeing this guy Patrick for almost our entire marriage, and she's done this before with her first husband. She changed her name afterward, said she'd never been married. I believed everything she told me." "We all did, James," I said gently. "She's very convincing." He looked up, his eyes filled with pain and shame. "How do I fix this, Mom? What do I do?" I reached for his hand. "First, we stop the guardianship hearing. Then we figure out the rest together." The confrontation with Heather happened that same evening. James, Martha, and I waited in the living room for her return. When she walked in and saw me, her face contorted with anger. "What is she doing here?" "James, you know there's a court order keeping her away from the children." "The children are at my parents' for the night," Martha said calmly. "And there is no court order, Heather. The emergency temporary guardianship was denied this morning." Heather's eyes darted between us. "James? What's going on?" My son stood, looking more resolute than I'd seen him in years. "We know everything, Heather. About Patrick Winters. About your first marriage as Sarah Wilson. About the drugs you were giving my mother. All of it." The transformation was immediate. Heather's concerned expression vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Whatever she's told you is a lie. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that?" "I have it on video," James said quietly. "Your phone conversation with Patrick, planning to take Mom's money, buy a lake house, divorce me." For a moment, Heather seemed genuinely shocked. Then her stance shifted, becoming almost predatory. "Fine. You caught me. But what exactly do you think happens now?" She laughed bitterly. "You can't afford this house without your mommy's money. My name is on the deed too. If you want a divorce, I'll take you for everything you've got." Which admittedly isn't much. "Actually," I interjected, "there are more serious matters at stake than the divorce. Identity theft is a felony. So is elder abuse and financial exploitation. And deliberately medicating someone without their knowledge or consent is assault." Heather's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "You can't prove any of that. The fraudulent credit card applications have your IP address," Martha said. "The identity theft investigator confirmed that. We have the pills you were adding to my mother's medication," James added. "I found your stash when I was looking for evidence. The prescription is in your name." "And," I finished, "we have Ben's statement about being told to lie about me hurting him. Coaching a child to make false accusations of abuse has serious legal consequences." Heather's confidence finally wavered. "You wouldn't press charges." Think about what it would do to the kids, seeing their mother arrested. I don't want to, I admitted. But I will if you don't agree to our terms. Barbara had helped us prepare a settlement agreement. Heather would move out immediately, agree to an uncontested divorce, and relinquish any claim to the house or my assets. In exchange, we wouldn't pursue criminal charges. You expect me to walk away with nothing? Heather snarled. You can take your personal belongings and the car that's in your name, James said firmly, and you should be grateful for that much. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. The calculation was visible on her face, weighing the risk of criminal charges against her pride and greed. Fine, she finally spat. I'll sign your papers, but I want 24 hours to pack my things. Martha will stay with you while you do, I said, to ensure nothing else disappears. Heather glared at me with pure hatred. You think you've won, don't you? That you've saved your precious son and grandchildren? They'll never forget this. Every time they look at you, they'll remember how you tore their family apart. No, Heather, James said quietly. You did that all on your own. After she stormed upstairs to begin packing, James collapsed onto the sofa, looking shell-shocked. I can't believe I was so blind, he whispered. Everything she did, all the warning signs, I chose to believe her over you, over everyone who truly cared about me. She was very skilled at manipulation, I said, sitting beside him. And you wanted to believe in your marriage, in the family you were building. There's no shame in that. But there is in what comes next, he said. The house will be foreclosed on. The kids will have to change schools. Our lives are falling apart. Not falling apart, I corrected gently. Changing. And we'll face those changes together. Over the following weeks, we worked to rebuild what Heather had nearly destroyed. James filed for divorce, and true to the agreement, Heather didn't contest it. She moved in with Patrick, though I suspected that relationship wouldn't last once he realized she couldn't deliver the financial windfall she'd promised. The bank agreed to delay foreclosure proceedings while we explored options. Eventually, we decided selling the house was the best solution. The real estate market was strong, and despite being underwater on the mortgage due to their original small down payment, we managed to sell at a price that covered the outstanding loan. James and the children moved into a modest 3-bedroom apartment closer to his school. It was a significant downsize, but as he told the kids, it's not the size of the house that matters. It's the love inside it. My apartment in the senior community became a regular gathering place for Sunday dinners. Lily and Ben were resilient, as children often are. With the help of a good therapist, they began to understand that their mother's departure wasn't their fault, nor was it mine. Grandma, Lily asked one evening as we baked cookies together, why did Mom tell us you were sick in the head? I measured my words carefully. Sometimes adults make bad choices when they want something very badly. Your mom wanted things that weren't hers to take, and she thought that making me seem sick would help her get those things. But you're not sick, Ben stated confidently. No, sweetheart, I'm not sick, and I never ever would have hurt you. I know, he said, wrapping his small arms around my waist. Mom told me to say that. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, I assured him, blinking back tears. Adults should never ask children to lie. James began therapy, working to understand why he had been vulnerable to Heather's manipulation and how to recognize the warning signs in the future. He reconnected with family members who had been pushed away during his marriage and slowly began rebuilding his self-confidence. As for me, I discovered a new chapter of life opening up. My apartment community offered activities and social connections I had missed while isolated in James's house. I joined a book club, took water, aerobics classes, and even started dating a kind widower named Richard who lived in the building next door. Most importantly, I reclaimed my sense of agency. The woman who had stood trembling and shocked on the sidewalk, faced with her belongings and a cruel note, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and unwilling to be victimized ever again. 6 months after Heather's departure, the family gathered at my apartment to celebrate my 68th birthday. Gerald and his wife, Anne and Thomas and their families, James and the children, Martha and her husband, even Nancy, had flown in from Florida for the occasion. As I looked around at the faces of people who truly loved me, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The road had been difficult, but we had emerged stronger on the other side. James raised his glass in a toast. To Mom, who taught me what real strength looks like, who fought for herself and for all of us, even when some of us, he looked down briefly, didn't deserve it. To Cathleen, the others echoed, lifting their glasses. Later, as James helped me clean up after the guests had left, he said, "You know what I realized recently? Heather thought she was taking advantage of a vulnerable old woman. She had no idea who she was really dealing with." I smiled. No, she certainly didn't. One year after finding my belongings on the sidewalk, I sat in the small courtyard garden of my apartment complex, enjoying the spring sunshine. So much had changed, both around me and within me. The path to healing hadn't been straightforward or easy. James had struggled with guilt and self-doubt for months, questioning his judgment and ability to trust again. The children had needed time to process their mother's abandonment. Heather had made little effort to maintain a relationship with them after moving in with Patrick, especially once she realized there was no money to be extracted from the situation. But slowly, steadily, we had rebuilt our lives. My relationship with Richard had blossomed into a sweet, mature romance. At 70 and 73, we had no illusions about riding off into the sunset together, but we enjoyed each other's company, traveled to places we'd always wanted to see, and provided comfort during the inevitable health challenges that came with our age. James had found a better teaching position at a school closer to his new apartment, one that came with a modest raise. He'd also started coaching basketball in the evenings for additional income. The smaller living space had actually brought him closer to the children. They spent more time playing games, going to parks, and engaging with each other rather than dispersing to separate areas of a large house. The healing of our relationship had been the most precious development. The trust that Heather had nearly destroyed had been restored, stronger for having been tested. "Grandma, watch this." Ben called from across the courtyard, where he was showing off his skateboarding skills with Richard's patient guidance. I waved and smiled, my heart full. At 8 years old, Ben had overcome his period of fear and confusion. Therapy had helped him understand that he wasn't responsible for the lies his mother had told or asked him to tell. Lily, now 10, sat beside me on the bench, reading aloud from her favorite book. She'd developed a passion for stories about strong women throughout history, particularly those who overcame significant obstacles. "Do you think I could be a judge someday, like in this book?" she asked, looking up at me with earnest eyes. "I think you can be anything you set your mind to," I told her sincerely. James joined us, carrying a tray of lemonade from my kitchen. "Mom, we got the final paperwork today. The divorce is officially final. How do you feel?" I asked quietly. He considered the question. Relieved, mostly. Like the last piece of that chapter is finally closed. He poured lemonade for everyone. "Have you heard anything about her?" "Martha's nephew says she and Patrick broke up. Apparently, he wasn't pleased when he realized she couldn't deliver the financial windfall she'd promised." I handed Lily a glass. "She's working at a dental office in Ridgemont." James nodded. "I hope she gets help someday. For her sake, and for any future targets." "People like Heather rarely change," Richard commented, joining us with Ben. "They just find new victims. But the good news is, we're all a lot better at spotting the warning signs now." It was true. The experience had made us all more discerning, more aware of the subtle red flags we might have overlooked before. James had even given a presentation to his colleagues about elder financial exploitation, using our story as a cautionary tale. As the afternoon progressed into evening, we moved inside for dinner. My small apartment felt warm and full with everyone gathered around. Richard had become a welcome addition to our family circle, his dry humor and gentle manner endearing him to everyone, especially the children. After dinner, James pulled me aside. "I wanted to show you something." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize. "What's this?" "I've been putting money aside every month," he explained. It's not much yet, but eventually. I want to pay you back for everything you lost on the house. Tears pricked my eyes. James, you don't need to do that. I do, Mom. I know you say it wasn't my fault, but I was part of it. I let it happen. This is important to me. I hugged him tightly. I'm so proud of the man you are. Later, after everyone had gone home, Richard and I sat on my small balcony, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. You know what amazes me most about your story? He said, taking my hand in his. Not that you fought back, that doesn't surprise me at all. What amazes me is how you did it with such grace. No bitterness, no vindictiveness. Just a clear-eyed determination to protect yourself and the people you love. I considered his words. There were moments of anger, believe me. Times I wanted to lash out, to hurt Heather the way she hurt me. But that would have only damaged me further in the end. That's wisdom not everyone achieves, even at our age. I smiled. I learned it the hard way. But some lessons are worth the difficult path. The truth was, I had emerged from the ordeal with valuable insights that had transformed my approach to life. I learned that family bonds, while precious, aren't immune to manipulation. Love can blind us to warning signs we might easily recognize in other contexts. James had been so determined to see the best in his wife that he'd ignored mounting evidence of her true character. I discovered the crucial difference between helping and enabling. For years, I'd thought supporting James financially was the loving thing to do. But in creating a situation where he depended on me, rather than developing his own financial stability, I had inadvertently made him vulnerable to someone like Heather. Most importantly, I realized that self-respect must never be sacrificed, even for those we love most. By allowing myself to be relegated to the garage, accepting disrespect and gaslighting rather than immediately standing my ground, I had tacitly permitted the situation to escalate. These weren't comfortable realizations. They required me to acknowledge my own role in creating the circumstances that Heather exploited. But that acknowledgement was ultimately empowering. It meant I could make different choices going forward. Now, at 68, I had reclaimed not just my financial security, but my sense of self. I maintained healthy boundaries with James and the children, supporting them without enabling dependency. I pursued my own interests and relationships. And I recognized that wisdom often comes through painful experiences, if we're willing to learn from them. What are you thinking about? Richard asked, noticing my contemplative silence. That it's never too late, I replied. To stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, to begin again. He squeezed my hand. No, it certainly isn't. As we sat there under the stars, I felt a deep sense of peace. The woman who had stood shocked and trembling on the sidewalk a year ago, facing her belongings and a cruel note, had been transformed. Not broken, as Heather had intended, but strengthened. Refined by fire into someone wiser, more resilient, and ultimately more whole. Life would continue to bring challenges, that was inevitable. But I would face them with clear eyes and a strong heart, knowing my own worth and surrounded by people who truly loved me. And in the end, that made me not a victim of Heather's scheme, but a victor over it. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who tried to take advantage of you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more. And share with others who might need encouragement to recognize their own worth and set healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and begin again.